The snow had started sometime after midnight. I'd heard the wind tapping against the window panes like a cautious visitor, but I hadn't bothered to get up and look. When I finally did, just before dawn, the world outside had turned to white, quiet, still. A blanket over the street, the sidewalks, the mailbox, with my name slowly fading beneath it. Christmas Eve. I stood at the front window in my flannel robe, clutching a chipped mug of lukewarm coffee. Maria's mug, the one with the faded poinsettias and the chip near the handle, she used to say, gave it character. It's been 7 years now since she passed. Feels longer, feels shorter, feels like the part of me that used to look forward to this day went with her. I didn't bother with decorations this year, didn't see the point. The tree stayed in the attic, lights tangled from last year's half-hearted attempt, ornaments still wrapped in newspaper. I'd told myself I might drag it down anyway, just to keep the rhythm of tradition, but the truth is I didn't want to pretend. Not this year, not after everything. I'd received 2 cards in the mailone from an old friend at the VFW, another from the hardware store's mailing list, offering 20% off snow shovels. No calls yet. Not that I expected one. The house creaked around me like it always does in the cold, wood settling into itself the way bones do with age. I shuffled into the kitchen and opened the fridge, stared at the leftover stew from 3 nights ago and the single slice of pie I'd been saving like it was a treasure. Christmas dinner, it seemed, would be more practical than festive. I sat at the table, the same spot I'd sat for decades, and stared at the empty chair across from me, Maria's chair. The one with the cushion she'd sewn herself. I reached across the table, out of habit more than anything, and tapped it lightly with my knuckle. "Merry Christmas, mi amor," I whispered, voice low and cracking. No one answered, just the wind outside and the faint hum of the heater kicking in. Another year, another quiet December morning, the kind that wraps around your ribs and settles in deep, where the memories live. I wasn't looking for it. I'd gone into the closet off the hallway to find the spare light bulbs, but the little cardboard box was sitting right there on the top shelf, wedged between a tangle of extension cords and a roll of wrapping paper I hadn't touched in years. I nearly dropped it trying to get it down. Dust puffed into the air as I lifted the lid, and the smell of old pine and newspaper ink hit me like a memory you don't see coming. There it was, nestled near the top, between a plastic snowflake and a bent candy cane hooked the ornament. A crude little reindeer made of popsicle sticks and brown pipe cleaners, one googly eye missing, the other slightly askew. On the back, faded marker letters spelled out, "To Dad, love, Ricky, 1992, my son, my only child. He couldn't have been more than 6 when he made it." I remember the night he brought it home from school, cheeks red from the cold, eyes bright with pride. "Look what I made you, Dad," he'd shouted, holding it like it was the Hope Diamond. Maria had laughed, taken a picture right there in the living room while I held it up like a trophy. That photo used to sit on the mantel. I'm not sure where it is now. I held the ornament in my hand like it might crumble from age. It was so light, so delicate, and yet somehow heavier than anything else in that box. I turned it over slowly, my thumb tracing the uneven edges. He used to call me every Christmas morning, even after Maria passed. The last few years, the calls came later in the day, then only texts. Now I couldn't remember the last time he said, "Merry Christmas," without it being attached to a favor. I stared at that popsicle stick deer for a long time, long enough for the cold to creep into my fingers. Then I stood, walked to the living room, and placed it on the shelf above the fireplace. No tree this year, but this. This felt right. One ornament, one memory, one truth. I loved that boy more than he would ever understand. But love, I was beginning to learn, doesn't mean you keep letting someone carve pieces out of you year after year. Sometimes, even reindeer break. By noon, I'd brewed a fresh pot of coffee I didn't really want and turned on the radio just for the noise. Nat King Cole's voice drifted from the kitchen speakers, singing about chestnuts and open fires like it meant something. I sat in my armchair by the window, watching the snow pile higher on the porch railing. The house was too quiet. Always is, this time of year. And like clockwork, around 2:30 p.m., the phone rang. Same time every year, right in the sweet spot between lunch and sunset. Not early enough to feel heartfelt, not late enough to be an afterthought. Just business hours for emotional transactions. His name lit up the screen. Ricky. I didn't answer. Not right away. I watched it ring a while, my thumb hovering just above the green button. 3 rings, 4, 5. On the 6th, I picked up. "Hey, Dad." No warmth, no pause, no "how are you?" Just, "Do you have a minute?" I could already hear it in his voice. That soft calculation, that polished friendliness he put on like a suit when he needed something. I knew the rhythm by now. He'd make small talk, toss out a comment about the weather or a memory he thinks I want to hear, then shift gears into the ask. It wasn't really a call, it was a transaction. I waited, let the silence build. He chuckled nervously. "So listen, things are a little tight this year. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." He always says that, every time. I could hear kids yelling in the background. His kids, my grandkids. Ones I've only seen on birthday cards and social media posts, never once spoken to on the phone. I leaned back in my chair, stared at the single ornament on the mantel. "What do you need, Ricky?" I said, keeping my voice flat. There was a pause. He knew I knew. The same dance, every December. No mention of Maria. No "I love you." Just the quiet expectation that I'd say yes. Again, I'd always said yes. But something was different this time. Maybe it was the silence after he hung up. Maybe it was the ornament. Or maybe it was just me finally hearing what I hadn't wanted to hear for years. 3 Decembers ago, it was the rent. "Just for 1 month, Dad," he'd said. "We're waiting on a check from a freelance gig. It's just a little tight." I wired him 1,200 that same afternoon, never saw a receipt, never saw a thank you card either. Just silence until the next ask. 2 years ago, it was the car. "We're down to 1 vehicle and the transmission just went out. I can't get to work without it." I knew Isabella had a Lexus, and I knew Ricky worked from home most days. But I transferred 2,800 anyway. Told myself it was just what fathers do. Told myself it was temporary. Last year, it was the loan. "Consolidating debt," he said. "Trying to get our credit score up so we can refinance the house. It's an investment in stability, Dad. Not just for me, for the kids." He used the kids like punctuation, every request wrapped in their names, their futures. He asked for 5-0. I gave him 3-0. Told him it was all I could manage. It wasn't. I never asked for it back. I didn't want to embarrass him, didn't want to damage what little bridge we had left. But each time the phone rang, it felt less like a call from my son and more like a monthly invoice with no return address. Maria used to say, "Ricky's just finding his way. He'll come around." But Maria isn't here anymore to believe for both of us. And me, I'm just here with the numbers. I wrote them down once. Sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and tallied it all up. 1,200 for rent, 2,800 for the car, 3,000 for the loan. That's 7,000 in 3 years. But it wasn't the money that hurt. It was the way he asked, like he was entitled to it. Like my love should come preloaded with direct deposit. He never paid it back, never even mentioned it again. I let it slide, every time, telling myself that one day he'd call just to check in, just to ask how I'm holding up in this house filled with silence. That call never came, but the next ask did. I taught high school English for 34 years. Same district, same cracked linoleum floors, same drafty classrooms that rattled every time a student slammed a locker too hard. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't one of those movie teachers who changes lives with a single speech. I was just dependable. Showed up on time, stayed late, graded papers with a red pen, even when my eyes burned from lack of sleep. The kind of teacher the system forgot, and the kind of man who thought doing your job well was enough. My pension's not much. It keeps the lights on, keeps gas in the truck, keeps peanut butter on the shelf. I never expected it to do more than that. Maria and I planned for a modest retirement. We weren't aiming for cruises or country clubs. We just wanted a little house, a quiet life, a front porch to grow old on. We got it for a while. When Maria got sick, everything we'd saved for went somewhere else. Hospital visits, medications, treatments that bought us a little time but drained every account we had. I didn't mind, not once. I would have worked another decade if it meant she stayed one more week. But after she passed, the money didn't last long. Life's funny like that. It takes your person, then sends the bills after. Ricky knows all this, or at least he should. He stood by my side at the funeral, shook my hand with those hollow eyes, said, "Don't worry, Dad, I'll be here for you now." He wasn't. Not when the roof started leaking, not when the furnace went out 2 winters ago and I had to heat the living room with a space heater and prayer, not when the truck needed tires I couldn't afford. He called, sure, but only when his own tires were balding, only when his own furnace quit, only when his own life needed patching. People think teachers retire with pensions padded in gold. I've got a modest deposit every month and a file full of memories I can't spend. And I'm tired of being the emergency fund for a son who stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a pocket. But even tired men can make decisions, especially on Christmas Eve. The chair across from mine at the kitchen table still had the cushion Maria sewed deep burgundy, the color of fall leaves. She loved Thanksgiving. Said it was the one holiday that hadn't been completely swallowed by gifts and glitter, just food and family and a full house. That's how it was for a long time. Turkey in the oven by 6 a.m., pies cooling on the windowsill like some scene out of a postcard. Ricky would arrive late, always with excuses, but when he finally showed up, Maria would light up like it didn't matter how late he was. To her, family just being together was enough. But that was a long time ago. 3 Thanksgivings now, I've eaten alone. Just me and the silence and that chair that doesn't scoot back anymore without groaning. Ricky doesn't come for Thanksgiving. Not since Isabella's parents started hosting some lavish get-together at their lake house. They have a bigger kitchen, he said one year, easier for the kids, as if my kitchen had ever been the problem. He called once, 2 years back, while I was carving a turkey breast I bought on discount. "Happy Thanksgiving, Dad," he'd said, his voice already half distracted. "We're just sitting down now. Thought I'd check in." I heard the clink of wine glasses in the background. Laughter, music. A life I wasn't welcome in. I said thanks. I didn't mention that I was alone, that the stuffing had come from a box, that I was watching old reruns while the dining room stayed empty. Last year there wasn't even a call, just a photo on Facebook, him and Isabella smiling with her parents under a chandelier that probably cost more than my car. No caption. None needed. People say holidays are for family, but they don't tell you what to do when your family outgrows you like a coat they no longer wear. I still set the table every year. Out of habit, I guess. Out of hope. Maria's chair stays across from mine. It's easier to pretend she's just in the kitchen, checking on the pies. But Ricky's chair, that one's starting to collect dust. And this year, I'm not dusting it off. I scrolled through my phone the other night. Not because I was expecting anything, just habit, I guess. Or maybe punishment. Either way, it was there. A trail of messages sent out like lifelines, never returned. Blue bubbles and voicemail timestamps stretching back months, years. "Hey, Ricky just checking in. Hope work's going all right. Sent February 12th. No reply. Saw the Broncos game. Thought of you. October. Nothing. Happy birthday, son. I hope today's a good one. August 3rd. Read. No response." I called when I heard about the wildfire near their neighborhood, left a message that night. "Just wanted to make sure you're all okay. No need to call back if you're busy." He was busy, always busy. Too busy for 30 seconds of reassurance. Too busy for the man who once carried him on his shoulders through a crowded 4th of July fair so he could see the fireworks. That man gets silence now. There are birthdays I've sung into the phone alone. Anniversaries I've marked by sending him photos of Maria's favorite flowers. Mom would have been 68 today. No reply. There are videos I sent of the dog we used to have when he was a kid, back when our house was loud and messy and full. He never watched them. The delivered icon was the only answer I ever got. The last time I left a voicemail, really left one, with a message that meant something. I remember what I said. It was just before Thanksgiving last year. I was sitting at this very table, pie in the oven, table set for two even though I knew I'd eat alone. "You don't have to come," I said. "But maybe just call. We don't have to talk long." That was it. No anger, no guilt. Just a quiet reach across the distance. That one didn't even show read. Sometimes I wonder if he deletes them all, or if he lets them sit there, like unopened mail from a past he no longer claims. Either way, I've stopped sending new ones. I still check. Sometimes habit is hard to kill, but there's nothing left to say that I haven't already whispered into a voicemail at 9:43 p.m. on a Tuesday he'll never remember. He wasn't raised to be like this. I need to say that. I need someone to know that Ricky wasn't born with this entitlement, this distance. When he was young, he used to say thank you without being told. Used to help Maria set the table, hold the door open at church, carry the neighbor's groceries up the steps without expecting $1. That's who he was. That's who we taught him to be. Maria used to say that kindness was a habit, like brushing your teeth. You had to do it every day or the decay set in. We tried to teach Ricky that honesty mattered in our house. If he broke something, he owned up to it. If he failed a test, we talked about the effort, not the grade. We said, "I love you" in our house. Not just at bedtime or when it was convenient, but during the hard parts, especially then. I remember the night he came home crying because he didn't make the basketball team. I sat with him in the garage, handing him sockets while I changed the oil. Didn't say much, just let him talk. Told him he was enough without needing a jersey. That he had nothing to prove to anyone. That hard work and good character would carry him further than a scoreboard ever could. Somewhere along the line, though, those words stopped echoing. I don't know when. Maybe when he met Isabella. Maybe when money got tighter and gratitude felt like weakness. Maybe I gave too much. Maybe I tried to protect him from too many hard things. Maria warned me about that once. Don't give him so much comfort, he forgets where it comes from. I thought I was showing him love. Turns out I was teaching him to expect it without effort. That love didn't have to be earned, just received. Now he calls when he needs something and disappears when he doesn't. As if my value comes with a $sign. As if my worth is tied to whether or not I say yes. But I know what I taught him. I know the man he could have become because I met him once. I raised him. I just don't know where he went. The mailbox had 3 cards in it this morning. One from the Clarksons 2 doors down. They always send one, with the photo of their grandkids posed in front of a fake sleigh and a 2 white dog named Bentley. Another from the electric company, believe it or not, offering me warm wishes and reliable service this holiday season. The third was from the VA clinic, a reminder to get my blood pressure checked before the end of the year. All signed with more warmth than anything I've received from Ricky. Last year, I got a card from the Taylors, even though I barely know them. It had glitter on it, and one of those handwritten messages about how you're part of the neighborhood family. I left it up on the mantel next to Maria's photo, because honestly, it was the only decoration I had. Not because of the glitter, but because someone, somewhere, had taken the time to write my name by hand. I don't expect cards from Ricky anymore. Haven't in years, but I still check. That's the part they don't tell you about estrangement. It's not loud or final like a slammed door. It's quiet. It comes in the form of junk mail and holiday catalogs, in the rustling sound of envelopes with other people's names, in the echo of your own disappointment. Maria used to send cards every year. She had a list, long and alphabetical, with addresses she updated in pencil. She'd spend a whole weekend writing in cursive that was starting to tremble at the end. Because people need to know they matter, she'd say, sealing each envelope with a kiss and a sticker that said joy. I tried once after she died, bought a box of generic cards at the dollar store. Wrote a few, stopped halfway through. Felt like pretending. What do you say when your own son doesn't send you a card, or even a text? When strangers know more about your well-being than your own blood? I placed the 3 cards on the kitchen table, just for something to look at. None of them were from family, but I left them there anyway. At least someone thought of me. It was just after 6. The sky outside had gone that soft blue-gray, the kind of color that folds around you and makes the world feel smaller. I'd made a small dinner roasted chicken, instant mashed potatoes, a roll I'd warmed in the oven so it felt homemade. Maria would have added cranberry sauce, even in December. A little color never hurt the plate, she used to say. The dishes were still in the sink when the phone lit up on the counter. Not a sound, just the light, blinking in the corner of my eye. I didn't look right away. I knew who it was. I'd known all day. It's always Christmas Eve. Not Christmas morning, not the week before. Always the night of. Every year, I tell myself not to expect it, that he won't call this time. That this year will be the one he forgets me completely. But he never does. Not because he remembers, because he needs something. I dried my hands on the towel Maria embroidered the year before she passed. The thread was fraying near the edges, but I couldn't bring myself to replace it. I glanced at the phone. Ricky. I let it ring once, twice. My chest tightened like it always does, a mix of hope and ache. Ring 4. Maybe this time he'd just call to talk. Maybe this time he'd say, "Merry Christmas, Dad. How are you holding up?" Ring 5. Maybe he remembered how Christmas used to be. How we'd open presents in our pajamas, laugh over burnt cinnamon rolls. Ring 6. I answered. "Hey, Dad," he said, that tone again flat, almost distracted. "You got a minute?" No Merry Christmas, no how've you been. Just straight to the transaction, just like always. I sat down at the kitchen table, beside the 3 cards from strangers, and looked out the window at the snow piling up around the base of the bird feeder I forgot to fill. My voice was calm. "Sure, Ricky. What is it this time?" He laughed, like we were old friends catching up. "It's nothing big, just a small favor. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." I closed my eyes. I already knew what he was going to say. I already knew how this would end. But I let him talk anyway. "Hey, Dad, you got a minute?" That was the first thing out of his mouth. No hello, no Merry Christmas. Just that same tired line he always used when he was about to ask for something he already knew I couldn't afford. His voice sounded rushed, like I'd interrupted him instead of the other way around. I could hear traffic in the background. Maybe he was driving, or maybe just walking to his car, fitting me in between errands. I sat back in the chair, my dinner going cold in front of me, and looked at the blinking lights from the neighbor's yard spilling in through the window. I didn't answer right away. Not because I was trying to be dramatic, but because I needed to hold on to this moment, this pause, before it all went exactly where I knew it would. He took my silence as permission. He always did. "I won't keep you long," he said. "Just figured now's a good time to check in." Check in. Like he was calling from a hotel, not speaking to the man who raised him, who taught him how to ride a bike, who stood in the back of every school play and clapped the loudest. I swallowed down the familiar knot in my throat and forced my voice to sound steady. "Sure, Ricky, I've got time." "Cool, cool," he replied, like we were strangers in a hallway passing each other at work. "Anyway, how've you been?" he added, almost as an afterthought. I didn't bother answering. There wasn't time for the truth. There never was. He cleared his throat, shifted his tone into that polished, practiced version of concern he only wore when it was about to benefit him. "Listen, I hate doing this especially tonight, but I'm in kind of a bind." I closed my eyes. There it was, right on cue. "It's not a big deal," he said. "Just a small emergency, and I figured, well, hoped you might be able to help out." I didn't respond. I let the silence stretch until I could hear him tapping something on his end of the line, probably his steering wheel or his phone case. He hated silence. It made him uncomfortable, made him feel like someone was holding him accountable. "I wouldn't ask if I had another option," he went on. "It's just things got tight this month. Unexpected expenses, you know how it is." I did know how it is. I knew what it meant to juggle overdue bills with tired hands and a heart that never stopped worrying. I knew what it was to patch a roof with duct tape because the paycheck hadn't cleared yet. I just didn't know what it was like to call your father once a year and only when your wallet was empty. He finally got to the point. "It's rent. We had to replace a few things, water heater went out, and Isabella's been dealing with medical stuff. Nothing serious, just bills piling up. We're short about $1,000. I'll pay you back, of course. Of course, he always said that. The truth was, he hadn't paid back a single cent. Not the rent from 3 Decembers ago, not the car money, not the consolidation loan. All of it sitting in the quiet void between us, unspoken, like some unwelcome houseguest we both pretended didn't exist. I know it's Christmas Eve, he added, like acknowledging the date somehow softened the blow. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. I just need something to hold us over. I looked at my plate. The mashed potatoes had gone cold. The roll had hardened on the edge. $1,000. Just like that. Like asking for a cup of sugar. Like I was an ATM programmed to respond to emotional withdrawal requests. I heard myself say, "That's a lot, Ricky." "Yeah, I know," he replied quickly. "But you're always saying family's supposed to help each other out, right?" I didn't remember saying that, not lately. But I remembered when it used to be true. There was a long pause on the line after he finished talking. I could hear the faint sound of music through his car speakers, some half-hearted version of Jingle Bells. I stared at the blinking light on my coffee maker, counting the seconds, letting the silence settle like dust. Then I said it, softly, not angry, just tired. "No, Merry Christmas first?" He chuckled, not warmly, more like I'd said something awkward in a room full of people. "Come on, Dad," he said. "You know how it is." I figured I'd just get to the point. I didn't reply, just kept looking at the gravy congealing on my plate. He sighed. Obviously. I wondered if he even realized it was Christmas Eve when he dialed. If he pictured me sitting here, eating alone. If he remembered the way Maria used to sing while she set the table, or how Ricky used to sneak extra stuffing when he thought no one was looking. I wondered if he remembered anything that wasn't attached to a bank transfer. "I'm not mad," I said after a while. "I just thought maybe this year would be different." "What do you mean?" he asked, a little too fast. "I thought maybe you'd call just to talk. Ask how I'm doing. Share something, anything." Another pause. I imagined him glancing at the time on his dashboard, impatient with the detour. This wasn't the version of the conversation he wanted. He'd planned for a quick ask and a yes. He didn't have space for reflection. "Look," he said, "I didn't mean to make this weird. I just need some help, all right?" It wasn't weird. It was just empty. Hollow in a way that echoed louder than yelling ever could. And somehow, it hurt more than any argument we'd ever had. "You don't have to guilt-trip me," he said, voice sharp now, all the casual cool burned off. "I'm busy. I've got a lot going on." Busy, always busy, too busy to talk, too busy to visit, too busy to remember that I still have a pulse and a name and a heart that remembers his first birthday better than he does. "I'm not trying to guilt you," I said slowly. I wish you'd call me when you didn't need something, just once." He exhaled, annoyed. "Dad, we've talked about this. I do what I can. I've got a wife, 2 kids, a job that's hanging on by a thread. I don't have time to sit around reminiscing, all right?" Sit around reminiscing, like remembering your mother's laugh was some lazy man's pastime, like connection was a hobby I'd taken up in retirement. "I know you're busy," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But so was I, Ricky. When I worked 2 jobs to keep this roof over your head, when I stayed up all night grading papers after tucking you in, I was busy then too." There was silence. Not the thoughtful kind, the impatient, itchy kind. I knew that silence like the back of my hand. "I didn't call to get lectured," he snapped. "I called because I need help. If you can't, just say so. I'll figure something out." There it was, the edge, the irritation, the mask slipping. This wasn't a son talking to a father. This was a man annoyed that his usual routine wasn't working, that the machine wasn't dispensing like it used to. "You only call when you need something," I said quietly. "And so what?" he said, like it wasn't the confession it was. "That's how life works now, Dad. People ask for help when they need it. I'm sorry if that offends your sense of nostalgia." I swallowed hard, not because I didn't have a response, but because I knew anything I said would bounce off him like rain on glass. and I was tired of standing in the storm. "I understand," I said. And I did. Finally. I didn't say goodbye, didn't even tell him I had to go. I just moved my thumb to the red circle on the screen and ended the call. The line went silent, the kind of silence that doesn't echo, it just swallows everything. For a moment, I stared at the screen like he might call back, like he'd realize what he said, what he didn't say, like he'd see the mess he made and try to fix it. But he didn't. The screen dimmed, then black. The phone just sat there, lifeless and still. I didn't cry. I've done that before, after the first missed birthday, after the second Thanksgiving alone, after the year he didn't call on the anniversary of Maria's death. Those tears came quiet and slow, sometimes in the dark when I was sure no one could hear, but tonight there were none. Not because it didn't hurt, but because something else had taken the place of sadness. Clarity. There's a point where grief stops knocking and just walks in, sits down at the table, pours itself a drink and says, "This is just how things are now." And when it does, you don't fight it. You just nod. You make room. I stood up, walked over to the fireplace, and looked at the little ornament I'd placed there earlier, the crooked popsicle stick reindeer with the googly eye. Still smiling, still innocent, still trying. I touched it once, lightly, then turned back to the kitchen, picked up the phone, and opened the contacts list. Ricky's name was near the top, had a star next to it. Favorites. I tapped it. The option came up, block this caller. My finger hovered over it for a few seconds, not because I was unsure, but because I knew this wasn't just a text setting. It was something deeper, something final. Then I tapped yes. That was it. The silence stayed. But for the first time in a long time, it felt like it belonged to me. I sat at the kitchen table without turning on the light. The dusk had settled in completely now, the kind of soft gray dark that made the outlines of the room blur just enough to feel like memory. The clock ticked in the hallway, an old wall clock Maria picked out at a flea market years ago. It was off by 7 minutes, but I never bothered fixing it. Something about the imperfection made it feel more human, more honest. I sat there with my hands in my lap and my eyes on the spot across the table where Maria used to sit. I could almost see her there, elbow resting on the table, fingers curled around a warm mug, that quiet way she used to listen when I needed to vent about work, about bills, about life. I thought about what I've given in my life. 34 years in a classroom, helping kids who barely knew how to write their own names graduate with pride. Weekends building shelves and patching leaks, driving Ricky to baseball practice, sitting through freezing games and school plays where his line was 2 words but I clapped like he was the star. I remembered the time Maria and I skipped our anniversary dinner to pay for Ricky's school trip. The job I didn't take because it would have meant moving him mid-year. The way we ate ramen some weeks just so he could get new cleats or go to the dance. And for what? A phone call once a year, a request dressed in casual obligation, a string of empty thank yous followed by silence. I'm not bitter. I'm not angry. I'm just done pretending the math ever added up. I looked around the kitchen, old appliances, chipped tile, that cabinet door that still squeaks even after I've fixed it twice. A modest life, but it was mine. Built with sacrifice, one decision at a time. A life given freely for someone who now treats it like a debit card with no password. I sat there for a long time, not planning, not regretting, just letting it settle in my bones that I'd done enough, that there was nothing more to give, that maybe this Christmas, the gift I needed to give myself was the permission to stop waiting for someone who'd already left. Maria had a way of seeing things before I did. She was gentle, but not soft kind, but never naive. When it came to Ricky, I always led with my heart. She led with something sharper, clearer. She saw patterns in people I was too hopeful to recognize. "He's a good boy," I used to say, especially when he forgot to call on her birthday or canceled visits last minute. She'd nod, not arguing, but I could see it in her eyes. That quiet shift, that truth she didn't want to say out loud because she knew it would break something in me. One night years ago now, we were sitting out on the porch, mugs of tea in hand, blanket over our laps. Ricky had just borrowed money again, said it was temporary, that he'd pay us back once his tax return came through. I was already trying to figure out how to shuffle our savings without dipping into the emergency fund. Maria stayed quiet, watching the sky like it held answers. Then she said it. "Roy, don't give him so much that he forgets to be grateful." I remember looking at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. "He's our son," I said. "I know," she said, "but love doesn't mean never letting someone feel consequences." I brushed it off at the time, told myself she was just tired, that she didn't understand how hard it was for Ricky to get his footing. But she wasn't tired. She was clear-eyed. She saw what was happening. She just didn't want to hurt me by making me see it too soon. Maria believed in giving, but she believed in limits too. In dignity. She used to say, "When you give without boundaries, you're not being generous, you're erasing yourself." She wouldn't have stood for these one-way calls, these hollow requests. She would have told him the truth long before I could find the words. And maybe if she were still here, he would have listened. Maybe not. Either way, she would have stood by me when I finally said enough. And tonight, I felt her standing beside me again, not in body, but in memory, in spine, in clarity, in the words I was finally ready to speak, even if only to myself. It was the first Christmas after Maria died, the kind of grief-heavy December where the air itself felt thick. The tree was still up, mostly because I couldn't bear to take it down. Her ornaments were still on the branches, small glass birds, those delicate ceramic snowflakes she collected one by one over the years. The house smelled like pine and lemon polish and sadness. I'd baked her coffee cake from the old recipe card, burned the edges, cried anyway. I'd told Ricky he didn't have to come. I thought I was being kind. I thought I was giving him space to grieve in his own way. He said he'd try, said he'd let me know. He never called. I waited all morning. Had the TV on low, watching parades and commercials, but really I was just listening for the phone. Around noon, I checked my messages, nothing. By 2, I'd convinced myself his phone must have died. By 5, I started making excuses I didn't believe. At 6, I ate dinner alone. Maria's coffee cake sat untouched on the counter, a ghost of a tradition I didn't have the strength to throw away. That night I checked Facebook. There he was, Ricky, smiling in a photo from Isabella's parents' house, holding a wine glass, sweater crisp, kids sitting on his lap. No caption, just joy. Just a holiday I hadn't been invited to. Not a call, not a text, not even a message saying, "Sorry, Dad, something came up." Just nothing. That was the moment the silence changed shape. Before that, it had felt accidental, like something misplaced. After that, it felt intentional, like I'd been set aside. Like grief had a limit in their house, and I'd passed mine. I didn't call him. Not that day. Not the next. I sat with it, this new understanding, while the Christmas lights blinked on without him. He never did ask how I spent that Christmas. Never mentioned it again, as if skipping it erased the need to account for it. As if I'd somehow stopped needing what everyone else still took for granted, to be thought of, to be loved. And the worst part? I let him forget. I let him move on without reminding him who was left behind. Last year, I mailed him a gift, wrapped it myself, carefully, even though my hands aren't what they used to be. Arthritis makes the tape curl and the ribbon slip, but I took my time. I found a leather-bound journal at the bookstore downtown. Simple, dark brown, elegant, the kind I thought he might actually use. I remembered him saying once years ago that he wanted to write a memoir someday. Nothing fancy, he'd said. Just stories for the kids. I'd never heard him mention it again, but I held on to that line like it meant something. I included a note handwritten, a real letter, told him I was proud of him, that I missed him, that Maria would have loved to see how the kids were growing. I told him the journal was just a place to hold stories that mattered, even if no one else read them. I mailed it 2 weeks before Christmas, priority shipping. I paid extra so it wouldn't be late. It arrived at his house on a Tuesday. I know because I tracked it. He never said a word. No call, no text, not even a thumbs-up emoji, just silence. I told myself it must have gotten lost in the shuffle. Maybe Isabella handled the packages. Maybe the kids opened it without realizing. I gave myself a dozen excuses because the truth felt too sharp. A month later, it showed up on my porch, returned to sender, still sealed, unopened. The handwriting on the label was mine. The address was right. Everything was right except the way it had come back to me like a message I didn't want to read. I stood there, holding it like it might burn me. Then I brought it inside, placed it gently on the mantel, and didn't touch it for weeks. Not because I was saving it, because I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. It's still in the hall closet, still sealed. A gift meant for someone who doesn't remember it was ever sent. Funny how the things we give out of love can end up feeling like reminders of what we've lost. They don't tell you that fatherhood doesn't stop after 18, that there's no finish line where you hand over the baton and rest easy knowing you did your part. I used to think that once Ricky became a father himself, he'd understand, that he'd finally see what it costs to give everything and ask for nothing, that maybe he'd pick up the phone and say, "Thank you, I get it now." But that call never came. Instead, I've spent the last decade wondering if I did too much, if I shielded him from too many hard truths, if I made love feel too easy like a faucet he could turn on when he was thirsty and ignore when he wasn't. I wrestle with it. More than I care to admit. Was I too generous? Too forgiving? Should I have drawn the line earlier, made him learn to stand on his own without using my shoulders? Maria and I didn't have much growing up. Our parents were firm, not cruel, but they didn't offer softness easily. That's why we promised to raise Ricky with tenderness. We wanted him to feel safe. Wanted him to know that home was not a place he had to earn. I still believe in that. But somewhere along the line, safety became convenience. And now, I'm not sure if he knows the difference. I think about the late nights walking the floor when he had a fever, patching holes in his jeans, saving up for band camp. I think about the years I spent working weekends so he could have what I didn't. And now I sit here, wondering if it all just taught him that love doesn't need reciprocation, that you can take without giving back and still expect to be called family. Maybe that's the part that stings, not the money, not the calls, but the realization that I gave him a template for love and he rewrote it into a transaction. Still, some part of me holds onto the smallest thread, the thread that says maybe it's not too late. Maybe one day he'll feel it really feel right and finally see the man behind all the yeses. But I'm not holding my breath. The kitchen was dark now, lit only by the dull orange glow from the street lamp outside and the soft flicker of the fireplace in the next room. I hadn't turned on any lights, didn't feel like I needed them. The house had settled into that evening hush it always did, walls breathing, floors resting. The phone was still sitting on the table where I'd left it after the call, face down, silent. I stared at it for a long time, not with anger, not even hurt, just stillness. A strange kind of peace, the kind that only comes when you've stopped arguing with what is. Eventually, I reached for it, not quickly, not impulsively. I held it like a man holding something fragile or final. I didn't go to the messages, didn't check for missed calls. I already knew there were none. Instead, I unlocked it, scrolled through the home screen, past the usual icons, weather, photos, news, and open settings. I paused there for a second, my finger hovering above the screen like it was waiting for permission from a part of me that no longer had authority. This wasn't revenge, this wasn't punishment, this was something simpler, cleaner. I wasn't looking to teach a lesson, I wasn't hoping he'd notice. I just couldn't keep answering a door that only opened to take. I scrolled down until I found it. Phone. Then, blocked contacts. One by one, I tapped through the steps, the way someone might walk down a hallway toward a room they've already said goodbye to. When I found his name, Ricky, I didn't rush. I looked at it, let it sit there on the screen, that name that used to bring joy, that name that once belonged to a boy who held my hand crossing the street, who whispered, "Daddy," during thunderstorms. Then I moved my thumb. The screen asked the question without flinching. Block this caller? They will no longer be able to call, message, or FaceTime you. That was it. Cold, plain, A clinical sentence that didn't carry any of the years behind it. No mention of birthdays, hospital rooms, Thanksgiving dinners that never happened. No footnote for sleepless nights, for thousands of dollars sent without hesitation, for the voicemail I left last year that still hasn't been listened to. Just a button. I stared at it. My thumb hovered over confirm like it was balancing more than just a tap. In a way, it was. It was holding every unanswered call. Every conversation that started with need and ended with silence. Every photo I mailed. Every card returned unopened. Every Sunday I waited by the phone. There was no music playing, no dramatic swell, just the sound of the fridge humming in the corner and the faint creak of the house settling its old bones. And me settling mine. I pressed the button. Blocked. No password, no second warning, just done. Like a light switch, like closing a door and knowing it won't be opened again unless you decide to reach for the handle. I put the phone down, not with force, but with finality. It didn't buzz, it didn't ring. It just lay there, quiet, as if it understood. There was no relief, not exactly. No celebration, no victory. But there was something else, something steadier. A stillness I hadn't felt in a long time, like a bruise finally stopping its ache. Like noise finally turning to silence, a silence that belonged to me. I stood and walked to the window. The snow was falling again, soft and slow, the kind that muffles the world in white. Maria used to say it looked like forgiveness. Maybe it did. Or maybe it just looked like peace. Tonight, that was enough. I thought I'd feel something more dramatic. That's what the movies always show, a father cutting off his son and collapsing into grief, tears in the hallway, shaky hands on the kitchen counter. But it wasn't like that. My heart didn't shatter. It just settled. There was no flood of emotion, no flash of regret, just the slow exhale of something I'd been holding for far too long. I sat back down at the kitchen table and looked at the 3 Christmas cards still standing there, the one from the Clarksons, the electric company, the VA. They weren't anything special, but they were real, unasked for, given without condition. And somehow, they meant more this year than any card Ricky never sent. I've spent years holding a space for someone who left the room long ago, kept the door open, light on, waiting for the sound of keys in the lock. But all that waiting just turns into wait if no one ever comes home, and tonight I set that wait down. Not because I stopped loving him. That's the part people never understand. Love doesn't disappear, it just changes shape. Tonight, it changed from longing into acceptance, from ache into quiet. I still remember the boy who once made me a reindeer out of popsicle sticks. That version of him, he still lives inside me, always will. But the man on the other end of the line tonight, that man didn't see me, didn't want to. And I can't keep bleeding for someone who only shows up when he's thirsty. So I let it go. I leaned back in my chair, looked around the dim kitchen, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not loneliness, not bitterness, just peace. My heart didn't break. It stopped asking for something it was never going to get. And that was enough. The living room was cool when I stepped in, that kind of chill that settles in an old house after sunset. I bent down, opened the little metal grate on the fireplace, and tossed in one more log. The flame had burned low, just glowing embers with a faint orange flicker, but it caught. It always does. I sat back and watched as the fire came alive again, slow and steady, same as always. The warmth crept out gradually, like forgiveness. Not loud, not fast, just honest. I held my hands close and felt the heat work its way into my fingers. Maria used to love this part, the ritual of it. She'd hum while tending the fire, brush the ash from the hearth with those small, steady hands. I could almost hear her now, in the crackle and pop of the flame, still here somehow. Not gone, just quiet. Dinner was simple. The same chicken I hadn't finished earlier, reheated in the oven with a little broth, a side of green beans, and the slice of pie I'd been saving all week. I didn't light candles or set the table, just sat with the plate on my lap, fire at my feet, fork in hand. And for once, it didn't feel like something was missing. I didn't check my phone, didn't refresh the messages, didn't look at old photos. I just ate, slowly, quietly, and with a kind of presence I hadn't known in years. People talk about loneliness like it's always a void. But tonight, it felt like a space I could finally breathe in. A room I didn't have to keep arranging for someone who was never coming. I added another log before the fire dipped too low again, watched the light stretch across the living room walls, and I whispered, "Merry Christmas, Maria," like I always do. Only this time, I didn't wait for the echo of what was missing. I just let the fire warm my hands and the stillness warm my heart. The sun peeked in slow through the kitchen window, touching the tops of the snow-covered hedges and casting long shadows on the hardwood floor. It was Christmas morning, but there were no footsteps, no paper tearing, no voices bouncing off the walls, just silence and the kind I'd come to welcome. But I didn't stay in bed, didn't let the day pass like any other. I got up early, stretched my back, and made the coffee strong the way Maria liked it. No one was coming over, no photos to take, no meal to prepare for a table full of people, but still, I moved with purpose. Because Christmas isn't canceled. Not in this house, not in mine. I pulled out the little speaker from the pantry and scrolled to the playlist Maria used to play every year. Nat King Cole, Bing Crosby, the kind of voices that wrapped around you like a blanket you'd owned for decades. The first notes of the Christmas song filled the kitchen, soft and familiar. I let it play. Then I set the table. Just one place. A simple plate, a cloth napkin, the wine glass we used to save for special nights. I even took a second to straighten the reindeer ornament on the mantel, Ricky's old one, the googly eyes still clinging stubbornly to its glue. I opened a bottle of red, one I'd been saving for years. Didn't need a reason anymore. Didn't need a crowd or a toast. Just wanted to honor the day with something more than leftovers and folded arms. As the music played, I stood at the counter and carved a few slices of turkey I'd roasted the night before, nothing fancy but warm. I added stuffing, green beans, one small piece of pecan pie. I plated it like Maria would have done, even though I was the only one who'd see it. I sat down, raised the glass toward the empty chair across from me, and smiled. Not a sad smile, not bitter, just full, quiet and full. "Merry Christmas," I said out loud, not to anyone in particular. Maybe to her, maybe to myself, maybe just to the room. And the room, for once, didn't feel empty at all. The calls started around noon, not from Ricky's number, the one I'd blocked, but from one I didn't recognize. Out-of-state area code. I let it ring the first time, then again and again. Same number, always short, never followed by a text. Just rings, like a knuckle on a door I wasn't interested in answering anymore. By the fifth call, I silenced the ringer, let it fade into the air like it had never come through at all. Later, I saw the voicemails. "Hey, it's me. I think your phone's acting weird. Just wanted to say hi. Merry Christmas." I didn't play the whole message. I didn't need to. I knew the cadence of his voice when he was fishing for forgiveness. The hollow, polished charm of someone trying to sound casual while their nerves knocked just under the surface. Another one came in an hour later. This time, he sounded annoyed. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but if this is about last night, I didn't mean anything by it, okay? Things came out wrong. It's been a tough week." Then, silence again. I didn't return the call, didn't feel guilty. That's the thing they don't tell you about boundaries. Once you draw them clearly, you stop apologizing for them. And a man who only reaches for you when you're gone isn't really reaching for you at all. He's just reaching for the version of you he assumes will still say yes. There were 3 messages in total. The third was barely a whisper. "I guess you're not talking to me right now. I don't know what to say." I did. But I'd already said it, just not out loud. I'd said it with every year I waited, every voicemail unanswered, every gift returned, every piece of myself chipped away until there was nothing left to carve. And now I had nothing left to explain. Not to him, not anymore. That night, after the fire died down and the house dipped into that deep, midnight stillness, I found myself reaching for pen and paper. Not the laptop, not a text. Just ink, and the kind of paper that absorbs everything slowly, like it's willing to carry the weight. I didn't write it for Ricky. I knew I'd never send it, knew it would live in the drawer with old photographs and yellowed receipts, but I wrote it anyway. Because there are some things a man has to get out of his bones. I started simply, "Dear son." And then I let it all come. 30 years of being the backup plan, the safety net, the man you remembered only when the walls closed in. I wrote about the birthdays missed, the holidays skipped, the time Maria sat by the phone waiting for your call that never came. I wrote about the money, the silence, the promises made with no intention of keeping. But I also wrote about the boy you used to be. How you used to climb into my lap after a nightmare and whisper, "I feel safe here." How you once cried when you accidentally broke Maria's favorite mug and used your allowance to buy a new one, even though it wasn't the same. How you hugged me the night I lost my own father, and for a few hours I didn't feel the weight of my grief. That boy is still in there, somewhere. I hope he finds his way out. But I ended the letter not with bitterness, and not with apology, but with this. Don't mistake my silence for weakness. It's strength. The strength to stop hurting myself in the name of love. I folded the letter neatly, slid it into an envelope, and placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk. No stamp, no name, just a resting place for words too heavy to carry any longer. And I slept soundly for the first time in years. The knock was soft, 2 quick taps, a pause, then one more. I almost didn't hear it over the low hum of the record spinning Nat King Cole in the other room. For a second, I thought maybe I imagined it. But then it came again. When I opened the door, there stood Grace Holloway from next door. Red coat, gray mittens, a plastic-wrapped plate of cookies balanced in her gloved hands. "Hope I'm not interrupting," she said, smiling that shy kind of smile people use when they're not sure they're welcome. "I baked too many again. Thought you might take a few off my hands." I laughed without hesitation, without forcing it, a real laugh. It surprised even me. "You're interrupting the exciting conclusion of me reheating chicken," I said. She stepped inside just enough to hand me the plate, oatmeal raisin, sugar cookies with green sprinkles, those peanut butter ones with the little chocolate drop in the middle. Maria used to make those every year. "They look great," I said, meaning it. We chatted in the doorway a while. Light stuff. The snowstorm coming on Monday. Her daughter's dog chewing through the tree skirt. Nothing profound, nothing heavy. Just easy company in a world that had felt too quiet for too long. "You holding up okay?" she asked gently, eyes flicking toward the fire behind me. I nodded. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." When she left, I stood there for a moment, plate in hand, the cold air still lingering on the edge of the doorway. I didn't feel alone. Not in the way I had before. The fire was still burning. The music still played, and I, just an old man with a plate of cookies, felt something small and bright rise up inside. It was joy, just a flicker, but it was real. I didn't send a check this Christmas. Didn't loan out $1,000 or cover a broken lease or wire funds at the last minute to fix someone else's mistake. I gave something else instead. I gave myself silence, the good kind. I gave myself permission to stop being the fallback plan, the unacknowledged backbone, the man who never said no. I gave myself the gift of a boundary. It didn't come wrapped in shiny paper. No one clapped when I opened it. There was no thank you card, no hug at the end of it. But it was mine. Quiet, solid, overdue. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the villain for drawing a line. I felt like a man reclaiming the space he'd always deserved. I used to think generosity meant giving until it hurt, until there was nothing left to give. But now I see it clearer. Sometimes generosity is knowing when to stop, when to love from a distance, when to protect yourself, even if no one claps for it. This year, I gave the best gift I've ever given, and I kept it for myself. The fire had burned low again, soft and golden. The record had finished spinning, but the silence didn't press in this time. It felt full, like a room finally exhaling. I poured one last glass of wine, lifted it slowly. "To you, Maria," I said, eyes resting on the photo of her on the mantel, her smile still lighting the room after all these years. To the life we built, to all the quiet things that mattered. I looked around at the modest house, the ornaments, the half-eaten slice of pie, the plate of cookies still on the counter, the phone silent now, and finally not a threat. To peace, I said, and to knowing when enough is enough. I raised the glass once more, higher this time. To me. I drank slowly. Not for show, not out of sadness. Just to mark the moment. Because Christmas didn't skip this house, it just showed up differently. With silence, with warmth, with a crackling fire, and no expectations. With a reindeer on the mantel and a weight finally lifted from my chest. And as the wind moved gently outside, brushing against the windows, I smiled and whispered one final thing to the empty room. Sometimes, the greatest gift you give is nothing at all. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.